Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. You know, when I first got involved in parahistoric research, the investigations, I couldn't help but look into a lot of the forebears, the ones who came before me. And two of those people that I looked into a lot of their research, a lot of their studies, a lot of their investigations were Ed and Lorraine Warren. Of course, nowadays, we have got all of these shows on television. The saturation of the paranormal field has blown up in the last decade. Some of it, through my own experiences, I can say some of it is very plausible, very possible. Some of it seems real far-fetched. Now, I just recently ran across a video that was done just a few months ago, and this young lady breaks down 6 of the Warrens' cases. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. I'm going to look at this little Dybbuk box a little bit more before I decide what I'm going to do with it. You guys check this out. This is good.
Hey everyone, this week's video is going to be a little bit spicy, and some people might be angry at me for it, but we're going to just hop in. This week, you're going to join me as I expose the truth and lies of the Warrens. For decades, they've been at the forefront of the paranormal field, capturing the imagination of everyone around the world. But were they just grifters seeking fame and fortune? Is there any real truth behind any of the cases that they were part of that were well publicized and in the media everywhere? In this week's video, we're going to delve into some of their most famous cases, discuss the case, and see if we can find some truth in the matter. Let's get started in this week's Paranormal History, a deep dive documentary series that tries to uncover the truth of paranormal topics. This video is controversial, and as such, I just want to put in a disclaimer. Any crimes mentioned in this video are all alleged, and the information in this video is a lot of opinions and conjectures that can easily be found online. Some of them first-hand accounts, some of them second-hand accounts, but nothing has been proven in a court of law. With more and more fake paranormal channels and fake paranormal videos out there, and we see more and more paranormal teams that are just not very serious and kind of just silly, the field is starting to get oversaturated with a lot of lies and frauds and just entertainment for entertainment's purpose. And while yes, it's fun to kind of lose yourself in the moment and just enjoy a scary video and enjoy, oh, you know, they did a good job faking that one, it does affect paranormal investigations for people who do take this stuff seriously. But Ed and Lorraine Warren were two very polarizing figures in the paranormal field, and they're responsible for a lot of the popularization of paranormal investigations. The Conjuring movie series alone is hugely popular, and a lot of people just blindly except the story that Hollywood has created in those movies of Ed and Lorraine. So in this video, I'm going to go over a few of the cases. I don't want this video to be very long. They've worked on so many cases. So I'm going to quickly summarize each case, and then I'm going to discuss the issues around it, things that were debunked or, things that were questionable in each of the cases. And then at the end, we're going to discuss a very controversial topic about Ed and Lorraine's relationship and some of the rumors that fly around about Ed. So that's enough of me talking. Let's get started. Humble beginnings. In 1944, Ed Warren, who was born September 7th, 1926, met Lorraine Rita Moran, who was born January 31st, 1927. Ed was working as an usher at a movie theater in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Lorraine frequented the theater quite often, and that's how they met. Ed eventually started to draw up some conversation with her, and over time, their connection deepened, and they began dating. They got married in 1945. Ed went off to World War II at age 17, and he was in the Navy. He was on a tanker in Spring Hill, anchored off the coast of Staten Island, New York. But on February 5th, 1945, an oil tanker collided with it. Everyone jumped ship. They were immediately rescued. However, 19 people unfortunately did pass away in the accident. Ed came back home for a short while, and then a year later, Lorraine gave birth to their daughter named Judy Warren. Eventually, once Ed was out of the Army, he started to pursue his different passions. When he was younger, he lived in a haunted house for some time, and that gave him a very big interest in the paranormal, and he started studying things about ghosts and different things of that nature. However, Ed and Lorraine were both devout Catholics, so a lot of the work they did still related back to the church. Now, let's discuss Lorraine's abilities. There's differing stories in this. I have heard stories that Ed was the one who was interested in the paranormal. Lorraine was a skeptic, and she didn't really buy into it until a certain point, and that's when also then she started building her psychic ability. However, she tells everyone that she's had a psychic ability since she was remembered when she was 7, and she could see people's auras. And then she started seeing like little future events, like a tree she planted, she saw it fully grown. So I don't know, there's some inconsistencies in this story, and I'm sure the one that she says about her having psychic abilities the whole time is the one that's most attractive to people that are interested in her. So I'll let you decide what you think about Lorraine and their beginnings and how she felt about the paranormal. That being said, Ed was always very interested in it, and he very much was kind of pushing that he wanted to sell art that was around the paranormal. Because Ed was actually a very artistic person. He actually went to school for art for a short time. He went to Perry Art School, but halfway through, he ended up withdrawing. Then he started selling paintings and pop-ups. Then he and Lorraine came up with this idea. It was mainly led by Ed, as far as I understand it. They would read about haunted houses in the newspapers, and then they wanted to do a painting of a haunted house and then sell the painting. But they wanted to get the story to attach to the painting. So it was kind of like an interesting product that he was trying to sell. And at the time, it was a little bit new and innovative, because this is like way back before all this paranormal stuff was popular on TV. So there could have been a niche market that he was trying to tap into. But what they used to do is they would sit in the car and Ed would sketch out their house. Then he would get Lorraine to take the sketch to the door, offer the family the sketch for free in exchange for telling their story. And that's how they kind of got their foot in the door, which it's a little bit weird in my opinion, but I guess it kind of worked back then. But when you look at different stories and histories of people who like grift, this is like something that you would start off doing to try to get your foot in the door. Somewhere along the line, it ended up that they started helping people with their ghost situations. They decided that they wanted to be, I guess, investigators as well, and kind of dropped the idea of selling paintings. We don't know exactly which case was their first case, but people say that it's the Annabelle case, and we've all heard about the Annabelle doll case. So that was in the year 1970. Two roommates had a Raggedy Ann doll that was possessed by a spirit called Annabelle, but then the Warrens said that it was a demon. They took the doll and put it in their museum. I'm not going to get huge into that case. I'm just touching on it as it's a chronological point in time. As they built out their career, Ed was sort of self-taught demonologist. He did work apparently with local churches and clergymen, but rarely were any of them named. I don't know if it was because they didn't want to show up in the newspaper and get all of the celebrity that comes with the Warrens. Some people have accused them of no priest even being at a location. So these stories, I'm sure there were some, because you can call clergy to come bless a house, so maybe it was something like that. But exorcisms were starting to become very controversial with the church, so they weren't just handing them out to people. So it's questionable how many times he was able to just get a clergyman to come do an exorcism at the drop of a hat. It's a little bit iffy. However, we'll get into one of the cases that touches back on this topic of trying to get the clergy to come out. All right, let's get started in discussing some of the cases. I have pulled out 6 cases. So the cases that we're going to be discussing today are the Amityville Horror, the Enfield Haunting, Haunting in Connecticut, The Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It, and the Union Cemetery. And I apologize that a lot of this stuff is going to be really brief mentions because I'm trying to fit this all into a short video. Each of these cases, I'm going to consider doing an actual full video on each of them, so we'll look forward to that in the future. The Amityville Horror. The Amityville Horror House has a story of true crime in its background. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr., in the middle of the night, shot and took the life of his entire family. It happened in Amityville, New York, and it was a case that shocked the state. It ended up becoming a little bit paranormal because he tried to create a defense of insanity, saying that the devil made him do it, that he heard the devil talking. That's where the paranormal side kind of came out of it. But he has since changed his story multiple times. One of his stories, he actually admits to just doing it. A lot of the theories is he was into drugs and different things like that. So some people think that he was just trying to do it for money and the freedom so that his father would get off his back about working and, being sober, and that he could just get money and drugs, which unfortunately addicts make poor decisions often. So it's an unfortunate side effect of it all. So that occurred in 1974. And about a year later, in December 18th, 1975, the Lutz family moved in. So the Lutz family moved into this house, and shortly after moving in, they began experiencing a series of disturbing paranormal events, including strange noises, cold spots, unsettling visions, as well as some silly things. There was green slime or something on the walls and floor, which doesn't make sense. But then the haunting escalated, leading to feelings of dread and a sense of being watched. The Lutzes claimed that the house was possessed by malevolent forces, which ultimately drove them to flee just after 28 days. Their story became a cultural phenomenon, inspiring numerous books and films, and continues to captivate audiences with its blend of horror and mystery. So, the Amityville Horror, I think it's actually got 16 movies or something. There's a ton of books. It's been a huge franchise. Lots of money's been made off of it. But the whole thing was just a hoax. It was created by the family with DeFeo Jr.'s lawyer over a bottle of wine. People say that Lorraine and Ed were there during this bottle of wine discussion, but I've seen other accounts saying that they weren't there. But regardless, Ed and Lorraine were kind of brought into the fold to make this story happen. The lawyer was trying to push the demon or devil defense, and he figured that if he brought in these demonologists and they kind of hammed up this story, that it would kind of grow from there and maybe he could get his client off. But on top of that, the lawyer just wanted to make some money. What ended up happening, however, is the family cut the lawyer out of the deal, and they went with a different writer as well than what he wanted. And that's why he ended up coming forward and saying the whole thing was a hoax because there was fighting over money. But mainly the debunk is, the lawyer came forward and said that it was a hoax. And he even did it he sued them. And it was in court records that it was a hoax. So, if he lies in court records, he can lose his license. So, when you're putting down, things like that, it's kind of a big deal once it shows up, in actual affidavits and things of that nature. The father of the family at the time, his stepfather, he was a bit of a grifter, and he liked to create different like money-making schemes. So, and also apparently he was into the occult. So one of the kids believes that the father brought in this thing that haunts the house. However, if this house was haunted, then all the families after should have also experienced something. And that's one of the other debunks of this story. All the families that have lived in that house since have never experienced anything paranormal. The only thing they experience is constant harassment from tourists. So they've ended up changing the number on the house. They changed the windows. They've like changed the design of it and everything, trying to get people to stop showing up there. And you could say, well, maybe the kids are haunted, but when they moved out, nothing followed them. So the story's been made up, and it was made up for money purposes so that they could make some money. There was other things that were debunked too, like they were saying that they saw hoof prints in the snow outside the window, but that month there was no snow yet on the ground. Like there's a list of things that debunk this. But Ed and Lorraine, they went on TV, they backed this case, they were sure that it was haunted by something, and they were really kind of pushing this, right? And this is just like one example of they go in and they just hop on board with everything is haunted or everything's a demon. Well, we'll get into the haunted versus demon thing too. But this just shows, this is just the beginning of their history of being not truthful. And then they end up creating book deals and movie deals and making a bunch of money. All right, let's get on to the next case. The Enfield Poltergeist. The Enfield Poltergeist is a famous case of alleged paranormal activity that took place in a council house in Enfield, London during the late 1970s. The Hodgson family who were living there, particularly two young sisters, began experiencing strange occurrences, including furniture moving, loud knocking sounds, and the girls reportedly being thrown from their beds. Investigators, including paranormal researchers Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, documented the events, which included the girls speaking in strange voices and exhibiting unusual behaviors. The case garnered significant media attention and sparked debates about the authenticity of the phenomena, with some attributing the events to hoaxes or psychological factors, while others believed it to be genuine haunting. The Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most well-documented and controversial cases in the field of paranormal investigation. So, the Enfield haunting, this was actually the inspiration for The Conjuring 2. The Warrens put their name on it, however, they showed up uninvited and they were refused to be admitted into the home. Like, they just showed up and assumed that they were going to be let in. One of the main investigators on it, who was part of the psychical research organization in England, he actually said that the Warrens completely over-exaggerated in the movie, obviously. But he did corroborate the claims that the Warrens were not invited, and the family didn't even hear, like, they've never even heard of Ed or Lorraine until they turned up at their door. Now, unfortunately, this whole haunting is also debunked. It was quite embarrassing for the researchers that were on it when it eventually came out. But one of the girls her hobby was ventriloquism, and she was really good at doing voices and making her voice carry. As well, they were setting up things to move furniture and things of that nature. They didn't quite know it right away, but as the girls got older, one of the sisters came forward and actually said that they faked the whole thing. It was just something that they faked for fun. Now, there is a news report. I will try to find it. They used part of it for the Conjuring 2 movie. However, I noticed, like, I got the whole thing, it's on YouTube, and at one point, one of the girls says, well, the place isn't haunted, and then the other sister says something like, yes, yeah, it's haunted. So I'll try to grab that clip and throw it in here as well for y'all.
How does it feel to be haunted by a poltergeist?
It's not haunted. Shut up.
Why isn't it haunted?
I don't know.
This poltergeist activity, this haunting, it's been debunked. Like, the girls said that they just were doing it, I guess, for attention, for fun, whatever it may be, but they made up the whole thing. But the biggest thing was the Warrens showing up uninvited. They did this actually with a few cases. There's a lot of cases and documentation out there where they just show up. There's one place that they just showed up and then started using the family's phone to call long distance, which back then that was expensive. And the family ended up like I think, trying to sue them or something to get that money back. It was a bit of a mess, but I know that there's been a few cases where they've just shown up and assumed that they would be let in, or they start helping a family, and like in the Conjuring one, for instance, they really upset the family and they get kicked out after like one day. They greatly over-exaggerate all their roles in these cases. Let's talk about the next one. The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is based on the true story of the Snedeker family, who moved into a former funeral home in Southington, Connecticut in the 1980s. Shortly after relocating, they began experiencing disturbing paranormal phenomena, including strange noises, apparitions, and unsettling encounters with spirits. The family reported feeling a malevolent presence particularly affecting their son, who is believed to be possessed by a spirit linked to the home's dark past. In an effort to rid their home of the haunting, the Snedekers sought help from paranormal investigators and a priest, leading to a series of exorcisms. Their experiences were later documented in a book and adapted into a film, contributing to the story's notoriety in the realm of supernatural lore. All right, now this one. This one is a little bit of a complex debunk. There is a, I think, Sally Jesse Raphael interview, but you should just watch the whole thing, honestly. At one point, there's like a neighbor in the audience, and she says, I never seen a priest go to that house. You won't name the priest. She was like, I reached out to the church, and they said that they've never sent a priest over, and they were calling the priest like Father A or something like that to keep his name anonymous. So they wouldn't name the priest, and this neighbor, she had a whole book of like proof as to why this place wasn't haunted. Like she had like a whole notebook with like actual backing up stuff, and she was in the audience of this interview.
That's what it is. Even the landlord said they got behind he never had a problem until they got behind in the rent. Then all of a sudden,
the landlord knew there was a problem with that house.
No, the landlord didn't know.
Wait a minute. If the landlord said there was a problem in the house,
Ask his daughter.
There was a lady living upstairs
Sally.
in the house. The whole time this was going on, there was an apartment upstairs. This lady got disgusted. She got moved out because she was disgusted with all the publicity that was going on.
The priest they named in the newspaper as having come in and blessed the house and worked with them did not go into that house.
I'm sorry?
He had not been in that house since Mrs. Hallahan's funeral.
Who? Priest.
Priest.
Mrs. Hallahan is a
When that article was in the newspaper naming.
So I found that interesting because eventually the author of the book, who worked with the family and the Warrens, he later came forward with the true story. So Ray Garton is the author. He ended up coming forward and pretty much like saying that the book is just false. He was a horror author and he was writing fiction, which is mainly why the Warrens hired him, was to make the book, I guess, exciting and sound really good. But he wanted to take it seriously, so he started doing his research and he went to interview the family. He actually explains, this is a quote, the family involved, which was going through some serious problems like alcoholism and drug addiction, could not keep their story straight. I became very frustrated, and it's hard writing a nonfiction book when all the people involved are telling you different stories. And then he goes on to explain too, like he found out that they were behind on their rent and things of that nature. And the boy that was experiencing a lot of the issues, he was going through cancer treatment, and it said that once he got on proper medication that everything stopped. Like the boy said this. He's like, oh, once I got properly medicated off certain meds and then got properly medicated, everything stopped and I felt okay. So there's a bit of like medication issues going on here. There's addiction. They're behind on their rent. There was like a lot of stuff happening in the house. But the main thing is they couldn't keep their story straight. So Ray Garton went to Ed and said, like, I'm having trouble writing this book. I don't know if this stuff is true. They all have different stories and things are not lining up properly. So he told Ed this, and Ed said, and this is a quote, oh, they're crazy. Everybody who comes to us is crazy. Otherwise, why would they come to us? You've got some of the story, just use what works and make the rest up and make it scary. You write scary books, right? That's why we hired you. So just make it up and make it scary. As well, Garton also pointed out something interesting that kind of flew under the radar. When the Warrens first started doing their work, they started as ghost hunters or, investigating ghosts. But after the Exorcist movie came out in 1973, suddenly they changed their focus from hauntings and ghosts to demons. And everything that they ran into was a demon and had to be exorcised, because the popularity of the Exorcist movie, it seemed like they jumped right on board with it, which which makes me wonder, like, were they grifting from the beginning, or were they sincere at some point? Because it sounds like a lot of the things they do are very calculated. Additional part of the debunk to this Snedeker family is there was a neighbor actually living in the upstairs apartment of this house during the time that it was haunted, and this neighbor never had any experiences and didn't hear anything. So, like, there was someone living in the house who did not see or hear anything. On top of that, all the neighbors came forward saying that it wasn't haunted. Like, it was a whole big thing. And the Warrens, the biggest thing that is really unfortunate is they came in and they said that it was a funeral home and that the people were, I don't think I can say this word on YouTube, but there was sexual things happening with bodies in the funeral home. And it seemed like they were accusing the directors, like the original funeral directors, of doing this, which just disparages their name. And then eventually they changed it to, well, somebody was doing it because that's what Lorraine saw. And the whole thing is just completely nonsensical, and it just drags people's names to the mud. All right, let's get on to the next one. The Conjuring. The Conjuring house, located in Harrisville, Rhode Island, is probably one of the most famous ones that is associated with the Warrens. It is the Conjuring house. It's from the first movie. Supposedly, the Warrens were called in to assist the Perron family in the 1970s. The Perrons experienced a range of terrifying supernatural occurrences, including unexplained noises, cold spots, and apparitions, which they believed were linked to the house's dark history, including the previous owners and tragic events that happened. The Warrens conducted investigations and claimed that the house was haunted by a malevolent spirit, leading to various exorcism attempts. Their experiences inspired the Conjuring film series, bringing widespread attention to the haunting and solidifying the house's reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. Alright, so for this one, the house is haunted, but what we're debunking here is what the Warrens did. There are some ghosts here, but it's not evil like what Lorraine and Ed came forward saying. So there was a woman named Bathsheba, and the story is that they said that Bathsheba unalived her child, and then she was hung for it. None of that happened. Like, they found like a name, Bathsheba, and they kind of rolled with it, and then decided that that was going to be the spirit. So it's just dragging a name of a person. Yes, they've passed away for a while, but completely changing their story. Bathsheba did exist. She didn't have any children, and she wasn't hung. So, like, there was no children that died in her care or anything like that either. She died of old age. There's a lot of drama around this house currently, modern day as well. If you're in the paranormal community, and you're probably quite aware of it. So, like, I don't really want to do a video of it, I guess, right now, because, you know, I don't want to get drowned out by the drama channels or anything like that around it. I would suggest reading into it a bunch more. It is something I'll probably do at some point, because there's a lot to this house. It housed a lot of people. There's a lot of different stories. There's a lot of stuff going on with it. So apparently, like, the kids came forward later in life and said that the things going on in the house weren't actually that bad and they weren't that evil. Things weren't very out of control until the Warrens showed up. When the Warrens showed up, actually the ghosts kind of were kicking up really hard and things got a little bit crazy. So they showed up and they started trying to exorcise the house. There's different stories that either it was a house exorcism or it was a seance. But the mother of the house apparently, like, floated up or something. I don't know if that's true. But she had, like, an actual physical reaction, like she was getting hurt by whatever was in the room. So Roger, her husband, got really mad and then stopped the whole thing and then told the Warrens to get the hell out. That's his quote. And he pretty much, like, kicked them out, uninvited them from the house, and he was done with the Warrens. And this happened quite a lot with the Warrens either showing up uninvited or people getting angry with them and kicking them out. But, you know, I'm not going to deep dive on all of these. I'm just kind of briefly talking about each one. If you want to look into more of them, I suggest doing so. Definitely with Conjuring House, there's a lot more to that house. All right, let's get on to the next one. The Devil Made Me Do It. So The Devil Made Me Do It revolves around the 1981 trial of Arnie Johnson, who became the first person in U.S. history to claim demonic possession as a defense for murder. The case began when Johnson was accused of unaliving his landlord, Alan Bono, after a series of disturbing events that began when he and his fiancée, Debbie Glatzel, encountered a malevolent spirit linked to her younger brother, David, who had reportedly been possessed. The Warrens became involved, asserting that the demonic presence had influenced Johnson's actions. The trial garnered significant media attention, raising questions about the intersection of faith, law, and the supernatural, and ultimately resulted in Johnson being convicted of manslaughter. That being said, the judge was not taking this demon thing seriously, to be honest. The case has since been dramatized in the Conjuring films, further popularizing its chilling narrative. Now, the debunking. This one, if you have Netflix, or if you get a chance, go and watch the documentary. And when you watch it, listen to the brother Carl Glatzel. He is the one that brings some reason and understanding to how fake this whole thing was. So Carl discusses actually quite a bit, and he was actually voicing his opinions as well back then too, and they were going unheard. But Carl explains his brother David, who the Warrens were saying were possessed, he was having like emotional issues and he was acting out. So then, the nature of possession came up. Carl never believed in it. His father didn't either. In fact, whenever his father got really frustrated with the whole thing, he would just kind of come over and like smack David and tell him to cut it out, and David would stop, which if he was truly possessed, that doesn't work, But Carl explains that the Warrens came over, and then the Warrens told them what they needed to document in order for the church to grant an exorcism. But when they told them this, they made sure that David was in the room listening. So they were like, oh, he needs to be doing this, he needs to be speaking tongues, he needs to be, contorting, like whatever it is. Like they made a list, and they were like, videotape it, audio tape it, take pictures, whatever. I think back then video cameras were expensive. I think it was audio and pictures they did. He goes on to explain, like Carl's saying, he was sitting there watching them. They were essentially coaching David on what to do. And there were things that David wasn't doing until he heard the Warrens say that this was part of possession. And then the next day, David would start doing it. So the Warrens, they didn't make the kids leave the room when they were discussing these things. So the kids were overhearing it and then just acting out what they were pretty much being told to act out. Now, during that case, the other thing that was interesting in this documentary that came forward, because a lot of the families don't necessarily discuss the money aspect with the Warrens. It's always said that the Warrens give a cut to the family of selling the story. But they came forward and actually explained the Warrens shoved a contract in front of them, didn't give them a chance to read it. They didn't give them a chance to get a lawyer. They were like, oh, it's just a boilerplate. Don't worry. We're protecting your rights. We're making sure that you're good. Just sign it. Like they really pressured them into signing it without reading it and fully understanding it. So they ended up signing the contract. And apparently Lorraine was saying, oh, we're going to make so much money. You guys are going to be, millionaires, whatever, right? And then it turns out they only got a check for $2,000. And the Warrens, they got whatever money that they got from the book sales, movie deals, whatever. It was a one-time $2,000 check. That's all that this family ended up getting. So it seems that the Warrens were actually kind of even ripping off people of their stories too, and weren't paying some people at all. This also comes into play that it shows that they're concerned about money. They pressured them into signing a contract where that family essentially got screwed over and the Warrens got more money, which just shows the nature of the character of the Warrens. If they're doing that, then they're not really good people, because they're always like, oh, we don't charge people for coming in and helping them. No, you don't, but you sell their story and the rights to their story and don't pay them for it. And that's worse, This really feels a lot like a grift to me. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of people just love the Warrens, and this kind of stuff is just, it's so obvious that they were ripping people off and they were just trying to make money off of people. This one though, there was no haunting, there was no demon or anything. And David was eventually diagnosed with a mental illness, was medicated, then he started getting a bit better, right? Because what they said is that the demon jumped from David into Artie, and then that's why Artie killed the landlord. The thing is, that landlord was sleeping with Artie's girlfriend, and it was just probably a crime of passion. Because a lot of people are like, oh, they didn't fight, and it came out of nowhere. No, she was cheating on Artie with the landlord. So, it kind of makes sense. Because if the demon ended up in Artie's body instead, Artie never had an exorcism after this event happened. And there's been no further demonic episodes. So if there's a demon inside of his body, where is it? It never left his body. There was no exorcism done, and there's been no episodes since. So this whole thing is just malarkey. Additionally, the logical brother Carl found out that their mother was sedating all the kids with Suminex, which can cause hallucinations, waking, and mood swings. And she was doing that, I guess, to make them go to sleep because she was just tired. You know, it was a weird time. There was a lot of weird stuff happening with medications during this like family unit time, like especially in the 60s and stuff with happy pills and everything. But yeah, you don't want to be dosing your kids. That probably messed up her kid. It probably actually could have caused the mental illness too, because she's dosing them every night with this stuff. And this is like old school sleeping pills. Like, so this is stuff that people figured out, oh, this is bad for you, and they've taken it off the market, right? So this whole case is just filled with so much bad things, and I feel bad because the brother David still honestly believes that he was possessed. Like, he's still like, no, it really happened. And I think like just between his mental illness and the Warrens really pushing it and then pushing the narrative and then all the movies and the book and everything, it's just cemented this in his brother's head, and it's actually caused a divide in the family. And, you know, the family doesn't really talk to Carl and stuff. It's a whole thing. Definitely go check out the documentary. It's a sad story, but it helps give a little bit of clarity as to how the Warrens kind of coach their clients and how they kind of rip them off of their life story as well. So it's very eye-opening, and I suggest you go check it out. All right, the last story. And after this story is actually linked into the big controversy of Ed Warren, which I'm going to discuss that controversy after this story. The Union Cemetery. Near Stepney Road in Easton, Connecticut, dates back to the 18th century. It's said that this is one of the most haunted cemeteries. One of the big stories is a lady in white. Nobody is really sure who she is, but some think that she could be the ghost of a woman who died in childbirth, still searching for her baby. But others also think that she may have been a woman who once unalived her husband and she's forced to walk the earth. There's also stories that say that she also was maybe a victim of an unaliving who was dumped in a sinkhole near the cemetery. Whatever her origin is, she's often sighted on Route 59, which runs along the cemetery's eastern boundary. So when people see her, they say that she's all dressed in a bright white nightgown, and has her head and face concealed with a white bonnet as well. So the Warrens got involved. So Ed Warren kept claiming that he had a tape where he caught this ghost on tape, but he refused to show it to anyone, and he refused to hand it over to any of the debunkers to prove its authenticity. This was something that he would always do often, is he would say, oh, I have a picture of that or I have a video of that, but I'm not going to show you the evidence. He would do this quite a lot. However, what's interesting is, and we'll get into more of this woman, but this woman is named Judith Penny, and we're going to get into her origin coming up next. But she eventually came forward and said that she actually dressed all in white and helped Ed record this video. So she was the ghost in this video. So this is just yet another piece of faked information, faked paranormal investigation results that the Warrens did. It just further adds on to their character as we look at a lot of these cases and realize like there's a lot of iffy things they were doing between faking stuff, coaching people on what to do, bad deals, making more money off of a family story and barely paying them a pittance compared to how much money these stories actually made. Like, there's a lot of that. And, you know, they really like to push that they were this like perfect Catholic couple and they were good people and everything, but they were doing all this stuff, which was not very good in the end. And it's really unfortunate that so many families were affected by this too. All right, that is all the cases that I want to cover today. There's a lot more, by the way, if you want to look into more. There's tons more cases. I just try to pull out like a few key ones that I thought were really important to discuss. But last, to end off this video, let's discuss the controversy of Ed and Judith Penny. Now, this whole story, this is all alleged. This all allegedly happened. Judith Penny wrote this all in an affidavit that was submitted to the courts for a lawsuit. She didn't come forward until after Ed passed away, but she honestly seemed like she was in love with him, and I think that's probably why she waited until he passed away. Even though she said that she regrets the relationship, she still really kind of loved him. So now, that being said as well, trigger warning if you don't want to hear about this, possible grooming, possible sexual things with a minor. So if you don't want to hear it, you know, feel free to jump out of the video if you need to. It was in the 1960s, and to make a bit of money, because, they weren't famous yet, Ed was driving bus. He was working as a city bus driver to make a little bit of money part-time. Ed was in his mid-30s, and he allegedly met 15-year-old Penny. She was a student at Central High School in the nearby town of Bridgeport. Now, Penny says that the two began an amorous relationship right away. And she made this legal declaration in November of 2014. She says by 1963, she had moved into the Warrens' home. She lived there for 40 years, and she apparently had an sexual relationship with Ed the whole time, with Lorraine's knowledge. At first, Penny was staying in a bedroom directly opposite of the one from the couple, but eventually she moved into an apartment that was built for her above the home. And she says in her affidavit, one night he'd sleep downstairs and one night he'd sleep upstairs. Now, there's a bit of back and forth with people on this because you can prove that she was there. She's in pictures, and at some point later, she ends up being Ed's assistant, quote-unquote assistant. But there's actually a police record about this. Because in the 60s, a teenage girl didn't move in with a married couple without attracting some attention. So the police ended up arresting Penny and trying to get her to admit to a romantic relationship. And she wouldn't sign a statement to that. She wouldn't admit to that. So they ended up ordering her to a delinquent youth office for the next month, which Ed drove her to after school. She had to report there, kind of like a parole office kind of deal. So there is proof that she was there as a teenager. Now, Ed and Lorraine told different stories to different people. Some people, they said that she was a cousin or a niece. Some people, they said that she was a girl who needed help, that they were helping. She was I guess, one who had problems, and they were taking her in to help care for her. Some people wonder, though, if the sexual relationship was happening right away or if he was just grooming her until she was old enough, because there is pictures of them together at events and stuff, and they do look overly friendly. So a lot of people do think that, and there were some friends too that said that they later on, when she was older, they knew that he was, sleeping with her. Whether he did that right away with her being a minor, or whether he just groomed her. Either way, it's very icky. Not a good person. As well, Penny, also in her affidavit, did explain an incident where she became pregnant and Lorraine pressured her to, get rid of it because Lorraine and Ed were famous at this point and it would completely cause a scandal. And she was essentially pressured into that. She does also put that in her statement regarding their relationship. Now, a lot of people have come forward and said, oh, well, she's a scammer, she's just trying to get money out of the estate after he died and all that. And the Warrens' daughter actually have come forward saying, oh, she's lying, I would know if my father was sleeping with her. But the thing is, the Warrens' daughter didn't actually live with the Warrens. She actually lived with her grandmother because the Warrens were traveling too much. So the grandmother was taking care of her. And she refused to sleep in the house because she was too scared of the stuff that was in the museum inside the house. So the daughter was barely around, and she was young too. She wasn't seeing what was going on. So I don't really take her account for anything. It's the daughter and then her husband or something have come forward saying, oh, none of that's true. But she wasn't really involved in their life as much as you'd think a daughter should be involved in their life. Additionally, to add to the validity of this is the stuff that Lorraine had put in the contract for the Conjuring movies. It was a very unusual agreement to write into this contract. And this contract is public record. So people can find this stuff. So Lorraine required for the movies, all future movies, including that there would be no negative information about the Warrens, including, now this is a quote, but I want to say it properly for YouTube. So no, sexual stuff with minors, no CP, no, ladies of the night, and no essay. That's a quote from the contract, but I'm saying it in the YouTube terms, so I don't get in trouble. And there's entertainment industry attorneys who've come forward and saying that stuff like that is weird to have in a contract. No one ever puts that in a contract. So she made it a requirement that none of this stuff come up. And then after the movie got popular, that's when sort of Judith Penny came forward. But then Ed was passed away at the time. And Judith was threatening to release her story if they kept making Conjuring movies. Pretty much from the the first Conjuring movie came out, it did anger a lot of people because of the image that Ed and Lorraine were presenting of themselves, of this like perfect, Catholic couple who were super nice and in love and all that. And there were a lot of people that they hurt over the time, and they didn't like seeing that on the big screen, and that's why a lot of people came forward. In the end, they ended up paying Penny, I guess, well, she already released her story, but they did end up paying her $150,000 for her life rights, and a confidentiality agreement was signed. The story already got out, though, because it was part of public record in the lawsuit. So, the story's out there, but she's not allowed to further discuss it anymore. She got paid off to keep quiet further. So there's a lot of information here that makes me think that this is true, and she was living there, and she was an assistant. She was answering the phone while they were away. She was living at that house. So she was a part of their lives. And there were people that witnessed stuff that said that they thought that they were in a, amorous romantic relationship. But then there's other people who are like, no, I swear they weren't. But then it's with her daughter, Lorraine and Ed's daughter, how well do you really know what was going on with your parents when you were barely there? But that is the biggest controversy with the Warrens. And, it might upset some people, but feel free to leave a comment below. And if you want to discuss anything, pop it on down there. So, I just briefly summarized a lot of this stuff, trying to go over it really quickly because there's so many cases. I think the Warrens did 10,000 cases. Just know I did leave a lot of stuff out, of course, because this video would just take forever if I went through every case with a fine-tooth comb. But look forward to future videos where I'll probably end up doing that, because I did do it with Amityville Horror, so we'll probably pick out some other cases that we'll do it with as well. Now, the issue with the Warrens, really, though, can be summarized. I found this article, and I was going to try to kind of paraphrase what this author said in the article, but honestly, I think I'm just going to quote her because it summarizes my concerns, why I'm making this video. When I read the end of this article, I said, this is exactly my concerns about the Warrens. So I'm just going to read you a quote from her articles, the last paragraph of her article. When it comes to the people that are involved in these real life stories, these are real people, and you might call it harmless intentions, but these people end up still troubled decades later by the chaos the Warrens fomented upon them. Carl Glatzel, for instance, claims the Warrens made him the demon-possessed villain of their narrative of the Glatzel-Johnson incident simply because he tried to insist that the whole thing was a hoax. That is, as he is quoted as saying, simply because I had a sane voice and I knew the story was false since the beginning. Now with pop culture happily passing along the myth of the Warrens, it gets harder and harder to speak the truth amid the lies.
Welcome back. It's like I was saying in the beginning. When you get involved in something like the paranormal, or, in our case, the parahistoric, you want to look at the studies of those individuals who came before you. Not just to learn ways of doing it, but to learn ways of not doing it. When you take on these cases and they seem too good to be true, as general rule of thumb, they probably are too good to be true. But to know that there's evidence there that these people that you respected, that you looked at, were faking things, cheating people who needed their help, who sometimes asked for it and sometimes didn't, but still, you want to be true to everyone that's out there that's going to observe what you've learned, but mostly you want to be true to yourself. And that is all based on your own moral compass. When Mark and Tony and I go out and do an investigation, the only editing that's done is increasing the volume so things can be heard on the video that we hear there. Of course, we put in the intro and the outro and the credits and stuff like that. But other than that, that's the only editing that's done. Like I said, you want to be true to everyone that's watching, but mostly you want to be true to yourself. As for me in this little divot box, it's such a cute little skull right there. I don't know. I just don't know. But that's all we got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little look at the Warrens, a few of their cases, and some of the stories that abound about them. I hope you guys have enjoyed the 31 days of Halloween on Living History's Mysteries. We'll do it again next year. Oh yeah, we'll do it again next year. And don't forget, coming up in the spring and summer of 2025, we have got more Ghostoramas coming to South Central Michigan. Definitely check it out. It's a good collection of local investigators, good music, good friends, and good times. And maybe a spooky story or two in there. And don't forget about the group investigations that always accompany. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do. And we'll see you out there.